Welcome to episode 14 of the Aluminium Podcast, Apple News with a British accent. Every week I'm joined by a different guest from the world of tech, bringing you the latest Apple and wider technology news, as well as insight into our guests and their stories. And for our 14th episode, which is live for the first time ever, from Magic Rays of Light, try and get the name right, and MacStories, Sigmund Judge. Woo! We have to do our own sound effects this time because we don't have post. How are you?
I'm good. End of the week, nice and relaxed.
Certainly
is. And bit of technology and Apple chit-chat with my best friend here.
Absolutely. It's always good to chat to you, Sigmund, and you are the first re-return on the podcast, so that's a win. You are the first person to be on twice. We've got Rhino Van Dam in the chat. We've got Ross Neum in the chat. We're not going to be hitting the chat quite as much as we normally do on my live streams because obviously we're going to try and turn this into a usable podcast as well. But we have got a little bit of a time saver because normally we do a getting to know you with the guests, and we've already done it with Sigmund, so that's great. But you are in a different location today. Where are you?
Where am I? I'm not sure. Hold on. Where do you want me to be?
Well, you got a whole cinema behind you, haven't you?
Ah, okay, yeah. Sorry. It's the same location. It's just a different angle. But yeah, got the background for the Apple TV behind me as my backdrop today.
So
but yeah, this is
the mountains.
This is a home cinema. Not quite there yet, but it's getting there.
It's looking pretty nice. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
But yes, so Sigmund, for anyone that doesn't know, is from Magic Rays of Light, which is basically the Apple TV podcast of the world. That's the only one that anyone cares about, which is why you've got such a lovely screening room, isn't it?
It is, but I got to say, I'm very, very excited over the next couple of months. The tvOS 18, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. Got some exciting things coming with the Apple TV.
Talk about it now. We're there. This is your jam.
Okay, tvOS 18. What do I want from tvOS 18? Honestly, a new redesign of the user interface, because it feels a little bit dated. It feels like there should be some stuff there. So you want a list? I'll give you a list.
Yes, let's go for it.
Right. The biggest thing, offline downloads.
Yep.
Because, and I think it ties in very well with Apple's green initiative, I want to be able to have my content download in the best quality possible, first and foremost. But second off, I want to basically take, to stream off those servers at a time where, first off, the internet isn't bogged down, but also when's the cleanest energy locally, right? If Apple can figure that out, I think that would be amazing. And if you're able to do offline downloads, maybe they could give us lossless audio.
Yes.
Which is something that has always been lacking and has always been the bugbear between streaming and Blu-ray.
Yeah.
So Disney are doing some interesting things on that front with DTS. Apple are kind of behind on that. So that's the main thing for me.
Yeah.
And
on that lossless audio thing, having the Vision Pro with the latest version of the AirPods Pro, you do have the option of lossless, I believe, or at least higher quality audio.
Yeah, it's a higher quality audio, right? But it's nothing in comparison, especially if you've got a home cinema system, right? The choice has been for years and years has been, all right, if you're streaming Apple TV, unless you're going really high end and then you're going Kaleidoscope, but that is for movies only. Yeah. And that is literally bit for bit copies like you would have on a Blu-ray, which is amazing. But that setup is extremely expensive. So I'm hoping that Apple can kind of find that in-between zone and really push the limits of the hardware. Of course, the mainstream consensus is probably going to be gaming, right?
Yes, of course.
Bigger focus on gaming. and Game Center's kind of lacking. So I wonder if they'll have put this time round a lot more resources in Game Center and what they're going to do with gaming. And it almost feels like because of these emulators coming through, if they hadn't thought about it already, then they might want to think about it now, because you have to find more compelling reason for people to buy games off of the App Store and not play their classic games. And of course, stay subscribed to Apple Arcade, which I think there's plenty of reason to.
Yep.
But as I say, with competition with free ROMs from nefarious means, that's a very difficult competition to be in.
I think the thing with the ROMs, because I'm not sure if this is something that you guys were talking about. I've been listening to the 9 to 5 Mac podcast as well today. So like sometimes all of those stories kind of get muddled in my head about who was talking about them. But if they were to put the emulator onto Apple TV, which right now I think you can AirPlay it there, but you can't run it on the Apple TV, is how you then get the ROMs into it, or whether they do it through iCloud. I feel like you guys were talking about this.
Yeah,
but I think
this is something Devon and I talked about. I haven't listened to Chance and Benjamin yet.
Yeah,
at
Ben
9 to
was
5.
talking about the same. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a challenge. But
so not so much a challenge, because I think what Riley Testert can do now is, because the app is officially on the App Store, he can bring in iCloud integration. And if he can't bring in iCloud integration, there may be a way, and we discussed this on the podcast, there may be a way via AirPlay, because you can definitely via AirDrop.
Yes.
Because you can definitely AirDrop from the Apple TV to an iOS or Mac device.
Gotcha.
Because you could record clips from your gameplay for certain games, but hardly anyone adopted the API.
Gotcha.
So that communication's there.
Yeah, but I think you might have been asking whether you could do it the other way. Maybe in the podcast, something like that, right? Yeah.
Okay. That we don't know.
I guess my question would be, using iCloud for it, therefore you'd be keeping those ROMs in iCloud. Would Apple then have some sort of liability potentially for the files that are being kept there? That's the only thing that I would question. Maybe. No,
because first off, Apple don't know what's in your iCloud.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right. So it's a privacy thing. And second off, just because you have a ROM, whilst lots of people will obtain those ROMs nefariously, there are ways.
Yeah.
There are ways of getting backups of your games.
Yes.
In a legitimate way.
Yeah.
And what is legitimate now? You can't go and get Game Boy games anymore, really. Apart from the second-hand market,
of course.
So the big gaming companies probably quite sad about all of this, but Nintendo had how many opportunities, and Apple, I feel like we're trying to push them in that direction, but instead we got Mario Run.
Yeah.
So it feels like a bit of an own goal from Nintendo, in all honesty.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I know they have put some good stuff. Like there's Mario Kart style games that have already come to the App Store. There is a Mario Kart on there, but I know in the arcade actually there's kind of very similar games. I think there's one that's with like Family Guy, is it, or something along those lines?
Yeah.
And Sonic Dash as well, I think, is the other one. There's like a Sonic
kart race, which is amazing. Which is amazing. Now, I've got to just very quickly respond. Evan Rogers says, "Hey folks, Sigmund looks like John Hodgman, but I have no idea who that is."
No, I was about to say I don't know who it is. Right, are you going to Google it?
I am Googling this. I hope he's being kind.
Fair enough. I was just going to say.
Oh, you know what? I'll take it. American author and actor John Hodgman.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? I'll take that. I mean, he's. I think he's a bit older than me, but yeah, I'll take it. He's got a better moustache than myself as well.
You've got a fantastic moustache in the photograph that we use, the black and white one in the thumbnail. I'm not saying that your moustache is not fabulous right now, but I just feel like it's, I feel like you'd put a lot of effort in that day for the photos.
Yeah, maybe. I think I was a little bit younger and a little less stressed when that photo was taken as well. So
we've got a comment down here as well from Christopher Gavin saying, what I would love is the same management as the iPhone, iPad, Mac, where I could say you can't use this app, or you can only use this app between these times. This is for like kids to do like managed screen time, I guess.
Absolutely.
Is that something you think will be coming? Because it's one of the few devices other than the Mac where there are actually different user accounts, which we've still never got on an iPad.
Well, so this is the thing, right? I think that usability needs to come. I also think now that we have multi-user, we need to have multiple home screens if we're not having a complete UI overhaul.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the one device that's shared by everyone. No idea why those balloons are happening.
I think you did
the
peace sign. The peace sign
Did
is the one that does that. Or it's because you put two fingers down like that, and it just read it as that. Lovely.
Awesome.
Love getting some balloons.
Yeah.
Evans just clarified as well. John Hodgman is the PC guy from Mac versus PC. That's why it's actually relevant. But thank you.
Okay.
Evan. Thank you for clarifying that one for us.
I love it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was not the PC guy.
No,
I was not the PC guy for a long, long time, and will not be.
Yeah, let's keep it that way. No, we don't want to slander you on the podcast. Cool. So that's the main thing is sort of the gaming, the emulation stuff. That was the first of your things, other than this kind of overhaul of the look of Apple TV's interface.
No, I think like the functionality, right? So downloads, as I was saying, but also multiple home screens. So, like for example, if your wife logs into the Apple TV, maybe she doesn't want the sports apps, but you do. Well, you don't, but I do, right? But I don't have a wife, so true. But those kind of things, like if the kids are logging in, then they would have their kids' apps up top, and maybe have certain things just completely hidden away. And then Apple could offer streamers more APIs that sadly they never adopt. Because there's a lot that the Apple TV can do, but we don't see it because I'd say actually from a developer point of view, the biggest thing that I feel Apple need to do is really tighten down what they expect from their partners in terms of what they actually take up in terms of the tools that are available to them. Multi-user, for example, you can actually have it tie in with what you've got. You can actually have multi-users tie in between the multi-user profile on the Apple TV and the apps. But
so things like YouTube, for example, could show you the right playlists and not hijack your TV.
Yeah, something like that. I actually had to look behind me then because that drove me mad. But no, what I'm saying is, like, even though you changed user, you then go on to BBC iPlayer or Disney, and then you have to choose your profile as well.
Yeah.
There's no need for that. That's something that has been conquered twice in different ways. The second time that they dealt with that was via iCloud. Okay. And it works. It's a line of code that each developer has to put in their app, and yet they won't.
It's strange, isn't it? It's very strange. Like there's so much that Apple does for everyone. It's just like you just have to say yes, basically.
And then, like, just to get on a soapbox for a second, then developers complain. Well, let's say big companies, not necessarily the people that develop the apps, right? But big companies complain that they don't have access to this and they don't have access to that. The one that kind of wound me up recently was Spotify, saying
that was the first one that came to mind when people talk about companies whinging that they can't have things that they've already got.
Yeah. Right. And it drives me nuts. So I think this StubDubs DC is going to be a really interesting one from a developer point of view. What do you think? What approach do you think Apple will take with regard to, I guess, a lot of the kind of confrontation that they've had to deal with over the last year? And what do you think they can do for like their relationship with developers? And I guess like, what do you think the balance would be between kind of being critical of the position they've been put in and making developers happy?
I mean, it's tricky, especially with the. I mean, I guess you're referring to the stuff with the EU and now the sort of stuff that's coming through from the States in the same kind of vein. It's been really difficult because Apple did kind of come out and go, okay, here's the solution to it, and everyone went, oh, that's great, and then 2 days later went, hang on, this core developer fee is actually very, very high. And then it's become more relaxed a little bit since then as well. So it's very confusing where Apple actually wants to draw their line. I don't know if they were just seeing how far they could push it, and then they were like, actually, this is fine. We can let you do this stuff. And now we've got like loading directly from websites coming in over in the EU, not here, not in the US at the moment. But it kind of feels like once Apple's demonstrated that this can happen, and presumably, if we have the first year of it happening over here or in the EU and there's not any crazy security drama, it's going to be a lot harder for them to then argue that they shouldn't do it in other places as well, I think, which is going to be difficult. I don't think it's the right thing for developers, to be fair. I think using the App Store is probably the best way for most people. But
I think it's that balance, right? It's how do you keep your customers happy and keep them safe and give them the experience that they know they get with Apple devices, and for the most part want to carry on having, right? And how do you make things open and make the opportunities far more far more interesting, I guess, for developers? Do you think that rate is going to go down on like in-app purchases and that kind of thing?
I mean, the fact that it's already gone down to 15% for almost every developer. Everything for the first million, I think it is, that they turn over a year is at 15%, and then it goes up to the 30 for the higher stuff. It's so few developers that are actually, well into the millions that they're taking, and those are the apps that obviously there is. It's basically you tax the wealthy more. It's kind of what happens with any tax system. This isn't a tax as such, but it's kind of that. The big guys can afford to pay a little bit more so that the smaller ones don't have to. So I think that's quite fair. I don't think it's ever going to be dropping down to where people want it at like 5% or something like that, because Apple built this whole thing. All of the monopoly stuff that's being said as well, I'm just like, I'm not convinced by it. I think they've got some really weak arguments, and they're just going to get torn apart in court. But we'll see. It's just definitely going to be. I mean, it gives us more stuff to talk about, which is great.
Well, I mean, because it's been lacking, right? There's been a lack of things to talk about. No, there really hasn't. But I know the thing that you've been excited for finally got announced this week. And you were right. You got an event. I got the little jive through your video earlier this week. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, everyone had been saying it to me. Like, even when I was on with Sam Cole, we were chatting about it, and he was like, oh, I'm with you. I would definitely always say there'd be an event, but Mark Gurman said there's not. Mark Gurman, you've lost your touch, man. What's going on? What is going on? He's been blocking people left and right. I'm probably next because I've not been gentle with it.
I think you know what I think it is. I think, of course, he has like some incredible sources, And so everything that he says is kind of seen as gospel.
Mm.
But, every journalist has to, they have to take their risks, right? And he has other things that he has to kind of do as a journalist at Bloomberg, and that not at 9 to 5 Mac now, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, and I totally get it, like sometimes I read his new newsletter and it doesn't feel like there's much substance there some weeks. But as I say, he's contractually obligated to put out that newsletter each week, and there isn't always something there. And I think as much as people can get stuff wrong, the internet has a way of being quite disrespectful.
Yeah.
Like, he's got his name for a reason, right? He's incredibly well respected. And, I've had a few interactions with him and he's been a real gentleman, right?
Yeah.
We'll always give credit where it's due and everything else. And so I kind of get the blocking.
Mm-hmm.
I do get it, because it's just like there's a line between you got it wrong and being disrespectful because you're on the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, I've had one actual interaction with him, which is when I put up the Power On bingo card, which was like, which buzzwords will be in this week's, and he actually found it really funny and retweeted it.
Love it.
But that was quite fun, just to be noticed. But yeah, to be honest, I think obviously there's this guy who used to work at Apple that Apple are currently taking through courts, who was supplying information to the Wall Street Journal, is the only one that we know of.
Mm.
But I wonder if, there were other places that he was sending information to as well that are suddenly not getting as much information as they had been before. I feel like there has been a lot less information coming out from Apple just recently. Maybe that was one of the big sources that was dropping stuff out.
And over the last year or so, since things have got tighter, I think covering Apple has been far more enjoyable because you have that mystique coming back, right?
Yeah.
I almost compare it to pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Once you knew everything that was going on under the, backstage and everything, pro wrestling kind of lost some of its vigor, right?
Yeah.
And some of its entertainment value, which I feel like's come back now. And I kind of see that with Apple as well. I'm really excited for everything that's coming. What do you think is coming at this event? And can I just say, Let Loose is the name of the event. I'm guessing that's not another favourite of Tim Cook's bands.
I don't know. I did see that Tim has said pencil it in for the date, which pretty on the nose, but so's the logo. We've got that animated logo that's got the pencil in it. They're pretty much telegraphing that it's going to be iPad. Being
a magic man that you are, and I'm guessing quite ambidextrous with your hands.
Fairly.
Right. Can you do the pencil fidget from the animation?
The little twirl around the finger. It's not actually something that I do. I can vanish it. I can do that sort of stuff. But I never actually got around to doing the pencil twirls, which is annoying because when I used to do the Flair bartending stuff, like it seemed like exactly what I should do. But I've never sat down and mastered it. But I should, because I've got an Apple Pencil sitting right here. Not even with an iPad, actually, which is weird. But yeah. That's in there at the minute because my oldest son has stolen my iPad Air. He's sort of claimed it for himself whenever he's here and awake. So there we go. I'm still waiting for a mini to come out. But what are we expecting
what are you
for the event? Yeah. So iPad Pros, yes. iPad Pro is almost certainly the biggest thing that's coming. M3 chips. Obviously, we're hearing OLED displays, almost certainly. Ross Young has been saying so I think that's probably the safest bet ever. Hopefully getting those cameras moved to the landscape side as well so that you're not looking off to the side whenever you're using your iPad. And that's kind of all we know about it. Potentially MagSafe coming to it as well, which would be interesting. I think it would be the puck style, so maybe with a circle on the back that's, energy transparent, if you like. So,
Do you think they can get enough power to an iPad
yes.
to be able to charge it whilst it's in use?
Yes,
Because
well,
MagSafe is super slow for me. I'm not a fan of MagSafe.
I really like it. But the next version of MagSafe we're also hearing is going up to 20 watts. And the charger that you get with an iPad is 20 watts.
Okay.
So that would be absolutely fine as far as I can see. It tends to be a 20-watt power brick that you plug your MagSafe into. Currently it does 15 watts. I think it'll be okay. But also, just using regular MagSafe for it will open up a bunch more accessories and things like that, because the magnets in MagSafe are really powerful in the official stuff.
And I'm using the Belkin stand that moves around and follows you. So they've kind of done that that side of things where you've got some kind of data pass through happening now.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that's going to be introduced if MagSafe were a thing and possibly replace what was it called? The little 3 pins at the back that no one used.
So yes, I think that's probably a decent idea. Those pins though were for the power pass through for things like using the magic keyboards and things. Yeah. Sure. But yeah, if you're using MagSafe, that's also power pass through, so that's fine. I think the way you would probably do it is ultra wideband between the two, because it's so close together as well. You're going to have really high data rates if that's what you want to do. So you could potentially have just a USB cable going to your keyboard, and then when you plug it into your iPad, you can use it for data pass through. You can use it for everything else, for the power as well. I think that'd be pretty good. I feel like it's going to be like MagSafe Plus, so it's got that circle in the center and then wider magnets as well for the keyboards and things for the alignment, which we've had in the past on those, on the Magic keyboards and that kind of case. So hopefully it will be small enough that you can use the same thing with the new iPad mini when it comes, and all of the different iPads basically being compatible in terms of like the magnet layouts, so that you would be able to use a smaller mount that would fit every iPad, if that makes sense. Not for the keyboard specifically, but yeah.
This is the reason why I love tuning into your videos, because I don't really understand like chip architecture and everything like that, like the innards of a device. So it's like magic to me, right? Yeah. But I'm interested to know what your opinion is, because the rumor is that we're moving from mini LED, which I thought was going to be here for more than a generation on the Pro iPads, right, to OLED. Do you think it's because OLED screens are vastly superior to mini LED? Given last week Sony's flagship TVs are moving to mini LED from OLED, right? Or do you think it's a kind of production on scale thing where like the yield was just too low for them to be able to do mini LED at that kind of mass production?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things at play here, because we've seen mini LED on the bigger iPad Pro, but never come to the 11-inch. So there must have been some kind of issues in terms of the production complexity when you're going down to that sort of size, perhaps. So maybe it's easier for TVs than it is for small, dense pixel displays. Also, with anything mini LED, you're always going to get some kind of blooming, whereas with OLED, you are, point light, because the mini LED is still dimming zones. It's like 2,500, I think, on the MacBook Pros and the iPads. But on things like the Pro Display XDR, which is essentially the same, you've only got 512 dimming zones, which is why you get that blooming, because you're still lighting an area of pixels from behind rather than lighting the individual pixels, which is the advantage with the OLED stuff. So it's swings and roundabouts, really. I think the OLEDs are going to be definitely more contrasty, but you're going from like 1 million to 1 to 2 million to 1. Yeah, it's twice as contrasty, but how contrasty do you need it, I guess, is part of it. But I think the other thing is the OLED that we get on an iPhone is completely different to the OLED you get on a TV. It's like different technology with the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is going to be coming to these, I'm not 100% sure. But I think it's going to be closer to what you get on an iPhone, because Apple isn't going to be changing it unless the color accuracy is at least as good as it was in mini LED. All of that kind of stuff. Like I've had some comments under my videos which are saying anyone that does professional color hates OLED, and I was like, I feel like that's
exactly.
Is that the case, or is it that they're not well calibrated, and in general those OLED displays have been oversaturated on Samsung's devices, for example?
Well, I got some colorists on this road that I live in that works on Slow Horses and Foundation.
Yeah.
For both Apple original films or TV shows. And I talked to them about it, and they basically said OLED is not something that they can work on for that reason, right? There seems to be a limitation when it comes to HDR, especially when they're finishing for HDR now. There's a limitation there. And I think that's why I'm questioning why Apple are moving to OLED, and what kind of source are they going to put in, of their own? Because we always hear we've heard LG and Samsung are basically splitting the displays right between them to be able to cover the demand. Interestingly, LG have quite an interesting technology behind their OLEDs that allow them to perform at Dolby Vision spec, whereas most of the other TVs cannot. Right. But when it comes to monitors, the monitors that people use for coloring will be mini LED, and it's because they can hit like peak brightnesses of 4,000 nits.
Yeah.
Which was always the case, even when Apple's Pro XDR was announced in 2019. I think that was a peak brightness of 1,600. Yeah. And a lot of professionals said, it's a nice bit of kit, but it's still not good enough for me with my HDR workflow. So I'm interested to see how they actually target the iPad Pro 2 Pros, if it is indeed for professional video, people in professional video.
Yeah, and my thing would be, when you look at the DOX mark or DxO mark, whatever it's called, where they rate the displays. If you look at the ratings that they've always given for the iPhone Pros with the OLED displays, they've always given them incredibly high marks and said visually indistinguishable from perfect. So if they've basically taken the tech that's in those iPhones and brought it up to an iPad size, as opposed to taking what I assume colorists have been looking at on the bigger scale for TV sort of scale and bringing it down, then I think we're probably going to be okay. But I'm not a colorist, as you're probably aware. But these pros know what they're talking about. But I have a feeling that it's because of the difference between large screen OLED and phone size OLED at the minute. And I think Apple is probably pushing it up rather than down. That would be my hope.
Well, do you have any hopes beyond the iPad for this event, now that it is an event? The HomePod Mini is kind of long in the tooth. AirPods Max is long in the tooth.
I don't have hopes for those two at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I think we might be seeing is Vision Pro getting a bit more of an international rollout. It's time.
Sure.
We've been waiting on it for a while. Yeah, I know. We can talk about this. We've played with it. I got to come and play at your house, and now you've made it even better. So we'll talk about that in a sec. I think there's still a potential for another color for the iPhone, like a mid-year refresh. You know, it's only, it was, I think, late April last year, so, beginning of May, really not that far off. We could get a new iPhone color. I think the Vision Pro thing is very likely. I think the iPad Air obviously getting the larger size as well. This is the other stuff that I just don't think Apple would have ever done as just a press release. New size of iPad Air. You're going to want to talk about it. I think AirPods Max, we're probably going to be waiting until the end of the year. But I do think that they will be coming this year, but it doesn't sound like it's a big update at all. It just sounds like they're changing the shape of the hole in it,
Perfect.
and maybe repainting them.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a huge update. I think it would be great if they did, and they were able to do at least lossless wired, over the USB-C. That'd be grand. But whether Apple wants to do that or not, I don't know. It just seems like it would be an easy win for them to put lossless into those, if you're going to plug it in anyway.
I wonder if that week we'll get a staggered release of announcements, right? We've got the Beat Studio that we're still waiting on. LeBron James just previewed the Beats Pill, which, if it has Siri,
oh yeah,
I'm going to be so into. That's going into the bathroom for sure. But yeah, like, I feel like to make the iPad Pros compelling, especially considering the 2018 iPad Pros are still doing a fundamentally great job, even though they're not on the Apple Silicon. And I just wonder what that is going to be. Are we going to get hints at what's coming in iPadOS 18 at this event? Is there going to be some early drops? Because I guess if you think about it, now with visionOS included with tvOS, iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, and macOS, of course, I wonder if there's enough time during keynote for everything, and whether or not they want to announce some stuff early, which is what they did with DubDub last year as well.
Yeah, that was when we were getting some of the accessibility stuff with, like, computer vision and that sort of thing coming through. It's potential. There's every chance that we could. I mean, generally they do try and hold it back. I think last year at DubDub we actually got a lot more hardware than people were expecting, because we did get the larger MacBook Airs. We got did we get the Studio and the Mac Pro at last DubDub as well? I think we got the M2 Mac Pros. I don't feel like there's going to be as much hardware at this year's DubDub. There's nothing that feels like it's on the docket for this one. But then, I don't think we were expecting that much last year, and it all turned up.
Who knows? A television, maybe.
Yes.
Or some Apple TV accessories, or a new Apple TV that needs developer support.
Well, I think Apple TV. So my theory is anything that's got an A chip is likely to come in September. So base iPads, iPad Mini. I mean, there's a potential that at this iPad event they finally kill the 9th gen iPad with the Lightning port and go all in with the new design language, and maybe reduce the price of the 10th gen. Don't imagine we'd get the 11th at this one though. But I do think anything with an A chip, which would include Apple TV, maybe with an A18. If they want to put this machine learning stuff into an Apple TV box, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? Because it looks like they're just going to go a bit heavier on the neural engine. Maybe upping the number of cores, maybe they've got a new design for the cores, but everyone's waiting with bated breath to be like, oh, what's going to be held, for the iPhone 16 out of the AI stuff? Well, we ain't going to find out at DubDub because they ain't going to tell you about that until they release the iPhone 16 and everything else that uses that. So whatever it is they're holding back for that iPhone 16 is not going to be coming to these iPads. That's the awkward thing. So we might get a little bit of a preview of some of the kind of machine learning. I think it's going to be called on-device intelligence or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to use AI as the name for what they're doing.
It would be weird, but then I didn't expect them to use it in their press releases either.
Which is weird.
It might be just a terminology that has become so mainstream now that if you're not saying it, you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And therefore, they have to say,
AI.
Because I remember talking to someone about this, and basically, I think it was actually my good friend who's actually in the chat, Rhino Van Dam, Glenn. And I said, hopefully they do something with, do something more with regard to LLM. And he was like, what is that? And they've talked about large learning, the
large language
language models. Sorry,
that's all right.
In the past, and who actually knows what that is in the real world, outside of our bubble.
It's definitely going to be interesting though, because it looks like, from what we're hearing now, I mean, we were hearing for a while that Gemini was going to power a lot of stuff, but now we're hearing a lot more. Everything's going to be on device with Apple's own LLM. And that's going to be interesting because you can't fit all of the information, obviously, on the device. So it's going to be a smaller version of that. I'm wondering if the neural engines are going to get their own memory, like their own set-aside memory specifically for running the LLMs. But the idea that this will all run on device also makes it so much better for Apple because they're not then having to run servers to actually keep these things running. It's all happening on your device. There's no additional cost once it's in your pocket,
This is the thing, right? Come the summer, the Humane AI pin and the rabbit, they already sound like something from yesterday, right? Yeah. That they're done. I will say, when the Humane pins become available and a little more useful, I'm interested in them because I think the design of them is beautiful. I think they've nailed that.
Yeah.
Right. If they can nail the other side, then fantastic. I do wonder with the pin, not necessarily with the rabbit, but with the pin, I wonder if they pivoted like in the last 6 months from what they were originally going to do and then decided to rely on everything be cloud-based. There's something that I feel like doesn't add up. Maybe I bought into the hype too much and I was following everything, and I remember all the preview videos and I really thought there was going to be something here. And then you look at who was involved in that project, and you're blown away to see it end up the way it did.
I thought the people involved with the project were behind you then when you looked round and then the camera panned. I was like, are they over there? Have they come to join the podcast?
No, I tell you what, I'm gonna recommend.
Okay.
From Ken Kosienda. I'm
I've
probably
heard the name
butchering
before.
that name. Right, Creative Selection.
Oh, nice.
Really, really interesting book. But he was involved with that team. So I think, as I say, there's some really, really interesting people there. But of course, you hear of all the big names, and then you don't realize just how many people are behind these projects.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's one of the joys of DC. When I went last year, getting to talk to people after things have been announced and hear the stories of, I've not been able to talk to my mum and dad about this,
Yeah.
right? And the first time they've heard about it is through the keynote, and now I can tell them, right?
Yeah,
and that was
me.
specifically
I
about
did that.
Apple Vision Pro, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that fine line between kind of believing the hype and believing the majesty of these great people, these great minds, right? But them being able to kind of convert their experience into creating a new product that kind of goes against what they created in the first place is a difficult translation, right?
Yeah,
It's a difficult transition, I should say.
It did kind of feel like they were going to start their own new company to say all the stuff that we did at Apple was bad, which is just odd, isn't it? Like the whole this AI pin is so that you don't use your phone anymore. Like it's to disconnect us from the screen all the time. But now you've got a screen on your hand. If only there was a screen on the back. Oh, that's a great way that you can access something like that, I think.
Do you almost feel like this is like the Google Glass, in the sense of it probably came like 15 years too early, and eventually we are going to go this way where have you seen the film Her?
I don't think I have.
By Spike Jonze with Joaquin Phoenix.
I know the one you mean. I know the
he
kind
falls
of premise,
in love he basically falls in love with artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And he's not the only one, right? And everything is done through voice, and the only time he really takes out of his phone is to capture or live stream or check out for like some visual context for like a news story or something.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. Like otherwise he is very much in the moment.
Yeah.
Because he's not looking at the screen and no one else is. Everyone seems quite aware, but they're still in their bubbles.
Yeah. Like I just feel like, yeah, Apple Watch or AirPods, really good ways of interacting with your phone without pulling it out of your pocket and basically doing everything that these pins can do beyond what you could add into an app. Like there was so many problems with the Humane pin where it was trying to tell you how, like most of their demos in the original videos were actually inaccurate. You know, how many grams of protein in these nuts, and then they adjusted it later, and it's like I understand where you were coming from. It's a great idea, not very well executed, I guess. But it also just feels like you're replicating stuff that things we already have can do and making it slightly less convenient. Like if you want to send a message, you have to speak it out loud. Like it's nice to be able to quietly text sometimes. Things like that.
But like the projector in the palm of the hand, right? Well, you're nodding in terms of, oh no, it was such a bad idea, but like, and me
it's a cool
being, oh yeah, I love it. Yeah. I love the fact that they went out of their way to take those risks.
Yes.
Now those risks haven't paid off on day one, right? Yeah. And hopefully, they're able to kind of get to day 10, right? In that regard. And really fulfill those ambitions. But I think that's the thing I would celebrate about the AI pin specifically.
Yeah. No, I as I say, I think like the sci-fi aspect of it is very much like Star Trek communicator pin, isn't it? I don't know if that's why they called it pin, because it doesn't pin to anything. It's got a magnet in it. But it feels like that. The screen on your hand with the laser, it looks really cool. It makes a great demo. I said from before it actually came out, that's going to be tricky outdoors, in daylight. And it turns out it is. Like, it's not really bright enough for that, and it's difficult because you have to focus it with your hand and stuff. Like, there are issues with it. Put a LiDAR on it so it knows how far your hand is away, and that fixes that bit. It's engineering issues. It's not that it doesn't work. But there's also some stuff where I think the ideas that they've got are great if you integrate them into the hardware that we already have, because I think having a separate number for it just kind of makes it kind of difficult to use, like integrate it with the other stuff. But I understand why it's really hard to do that when you're not running Android or iOS or a fork of either, really. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to integrate with stuff.
Michael Pepper mentions that he tried a bunch of the demoed commands and that Siri was actually faster on most of them. And funnily enough, I saw a video from your previous guest, Stephen Robles.
Yes.
Who's fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
And he compared Siri with the Humane Pin and with the rabbit. And Siri came out on top more times than I even expected. I think people, for the most part, kind of given up on Siri, and in the background, it's been improving.
Yeah,
the one thing, I mean, the one thing that specifically the Humane Pin can do, which I would love to see Apple do, is analyze contextually what I'm seeing in front of me, which I think would be really helpful from an accessibility perspective.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if Apple are going to do that, that's what they'll use it for.
Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but someone was with one of the Humane founders and tried that, and it lied to them about how many chairs were in the room. There's things like that, it's like it overestimated the number of chairs and stuff like that. And it was
they're things that can be patched.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right, and worked on, right?
But yeah, it's like it would be grand if it could do that kind of stuff at least. But yeah, I think I've said before, things like Vision Pro, when we saw the computer vision stuff for the iPhone where it's telling you what's in front of you, it's basically Geordie LaForge's visor from Star Trek, Blind people can now see, kind of, identify what's in front of them, where they're pointing, all that kind of thing. That would be really helpful. And Apple is always good at these accessibility things. It's one of the things that they're incredibly good at.
So we talk about the Vision Pro.
Oh, okay.
Because you came round.
I did.
And I'm sorry it didn't happen earlier, as listeners will know. I had a few things going on.
Yeah,
so inconvenient, honestly.
we had some good chats though.
We did whilst I was in hospital. You called me a number of times, and we basically did this, but not recorded.
I know,
it was fun.
Yeah, you weren't quite as animated.
True. Yeah, I was pretty dosed up.
Yeah, but
you came and visited because my mum lives not too far from you.
Yeah,
in the UK. I'm London based, of course, and we'll have to get you to London at some point. But you got to try the Apple Vision Pro for the first time. Now, keep in mind, the light seal wasn't molded to you, even when it was pickup time, I was like, scan your face, let's get you a proper light seal. Thankfully, I think our faces are kind of the same in Apple world. So you got to come round. Eventually, we got you to put on Apple Vision Pro after it got charged and everything
and updated
else.
And things.
And updated, and because honestly, whilst a lot of people aren't talking about it as much, my excuse for not using it as much had been because of the hospital stuff that was going on, and but I've made some changes recently, which we'll get into in a little bit, that have made completely basically changed the experience for me of Apple Vision. But yeah, I mean, you watched every video leading up, so you've got a good idea of what to expect, and you got a wide range of faults.
Yeah.
On so. I'm interested to know what your first take is, because we didn't really talk about it. I just kind of let you get on with it and let you kind of take some time.
Yeah, I had about an hour, right?
assess things.
Yeah.
Because so, is it as magical as you were hoping it would be?
Yes
But
and no. So there's some massively incredible things about it, and a couple of things where I was just like, oh, thought that would be slightly different. But putting it on for the first time, I didn't think it's as heavy as people have been making out. I don't think it's uncomfortable. I was wearing the dual strap, which is the one that you had attached to it. I didn't try it with the solo loop or whatever it's called. I think it's the solo loop. But not uncomfortable. Not much pressure on my face. Don't feel like it left a mark, but then I couldn't see. Maybe it did. And then obviously went through the calibration process to calibrate my own eyes to make sure that my eyes worked, which was grand. And you're basically just looking around a circle at different little circles and just focusing on them and tapping your fingers. Really, really intuitive. Like, got through that really, really quickly. I think we were saying about the fit. I think it sat a little bit high on my face, so glancing down to the bottom ones was a little trickier than it would have been with an exact fit, but I can't really blame it for that. I think the first thing that surprised me was with the cameras, you can definitely tell that you are looking through a camera, but it is very, very good. Like, it is not laggy at all. There was just a little bit of like grain on the real world, I think, was the only thing I would say. And you know, you're going to get a little bit of noise when you're looking through cameras and they're having to work that quickly, all of that sort of thing. But as soon as you enter an environment, you're there. Like, it's not even close. The depth that you feel is real. Like, you genuinely feel like you are gazing off into the distance for a couple of miles. You know, that's one of the things that I think was massively impactful. The demo with the dinosaur and the butterflies, that genuinely feels like the butterflies coming to land on your finger, and how quickly it tracks that is very, very good. The dinosaur, I don't know, but it almost felt like they'd made the fans work so that when the dinosaur breathed, you could feel it. But I think that's just my brain thinking that. You know, when it feels that real and it's right up to you. One thing that the demos don't, or the kind of online videos don't make you realize, is how big that virtual display is for the dinosaur thing. It's your whole field of view. It's like being in a cinema, but right up close to the screen. And then the dinosaurs come out of the screen. They're essentially off in the distance through this kind of portal on your wall, and then they come through. And it's very, very engaging. It's very, very good. I think the things that I probably maybe over-expected on it were things like my hands were, when I was swiping on menus side to side and things like that, my hands were going out of the range of the sensors a little bit, so everything would swipe across and then swipe back into the middle to where it was. And I'd be like, oh, where's it back? Where's it back?
But I think from that perspective, even though I thought, like, obviously you whizzed through calibration and everything else, and you seem to be quite at home, the one thing I noticed was that you were quite over dramatic with your hand movements. So I think that is I've had it for an hour kind of thing.
100%. No, it's just, I kind of, from the way that it was reviewed by some people, I think I just expected wherever your hands are, it can see them. When what they meant was, you don't need to lift your hands, you can just do it in your lap, you know. So it's not like you can be but I think that is something that they will change in future generations. I think it will have a little bit more periphery, so that it can kind of see what's going on around you, and that would also be useful if they're going to do more immersive games where they'd be able to then sort of map your environment. I know it's already using LiDAR to kind of map what's around you to keep you safe as well. But that might be something that they increase, is the kind of scope of those sensors. Because I know one of the other things that's been mentioned is people with like larger moustaches and beards. It struggles to see their face when they're using personas, for example. So Quinn from Snazzy Labs was doing his podcast with John and Sam, and it basically looked like he was a ventriloquist because he was chatting away and like this. So I think that's the sort of thing, these are first generation edge cases that are obviously not necessarily picked up on right at the beginning, but the overall experience of it, fantastic. Like, I don't know, there was sort of things where you'd had trial subscriptions previously, so not everything was available in terms of like looking at, and obviously the fact that you're in the UK and it's designed to be in America, not everything's working in terms of some of those subscriptions and stuff. So it wasn't a complete view of it, but it was a really, really good taster to see what it will do. And yeah, it's definitely, Vision OS is definitely where it's going to be. Whether the form factor of the headset as it is now, or it becomes more lightweight, if we got to glasses, then it takes actually quite a lot of processing off of the headset itself, because it's not having to process and re-render the entire outside world to you. It's only having to render the new things to your environment and track where you are, even to keep things stable. So I think that's where they're going to end up going, because Apple doesn't want to disconnect you from the outside world, but everyone is still thinking that this does, I guess, until they use it.
There's a reason why the battery is shaped like an iPhone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's quite clear where they want to go. I will say, as much fun as I'm having with Apple Vision Pro, and I really do love it, I think, and this might be a controversial take because I just ordered a pair, but I really love what Meta are doing with the Ray-Ban glasses. They announced like video calling this week, which I thought was that was kind of the thing that made me go, okay, I see where this is going. I like it. I'm not a big fan of the company behind it.
Yeah,
but
it's first-person video calling, isn't it? Because it's showing what you're looking at as opposed to showing you.
And this is the thing, right? One of the compelling things for me, when I updated my Apple Vision Pro to the latest software, I had a friend in Philadelphia for WrestleMania weekend. And the first time I ever got to see something from their perspective via FaceTime was them in an arena waiting for Monday Night Raw to start.
I think you told me about this. Yeah.
And it was incredible. It was such an incredible experience. And what they're doing with spatial personas and everything else, I think is really, really cool on the Apple Vision Pro. But the form factor of it makes me yearn for a technology that just isn't available yet.
Yeah.
Right. So the difference between that and say like the Meta Ray-Ban glasses is that there is no screen on the glasses. It's pretty much, it feels like 2 steps forward from the Snapchat spectacles, which I actually had a pair of.
Okay.
And I thought they were great for capturing stuff. Where I thought those spectacles were better is they captured in like I can't remember what resolution it was, but it was basically a 3D video format.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could really kind of choose what you, where you wanted to focus and export for a 2D video.
Yeah. Whereas
these from Meta, I believe, just shoot in vertical.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it.
I mean,
so
to be honest, I could see Apple releasing a version of that which shoots spatial video while you're out and about that you then watch back on Vision Pro later. I'd
love it.
Because then it's much less conspicuous, it's much lighter weight, but you can capture those moments while you're out and about with, a capture button.
Do you think spatial video is always going to be restricted to Apple Vision Pro, or do you think, as Devon and I kind of talked about and we keep talking about, the idea of an Apple TV, like an actual Apple television set happening, right? And then that's the only television set that could do some kind of form of spatial video playback.
I mean, I've said before that I thought Apple might just put out an Apple TV box that supports the existing 3D TVs, but everyone stopped making
There aren't
them.
any 3D TVs.
No, they've stopped making them now.
Even
but
this
there
projector.
were so many. Yeah.
Even this projector, it's a laser projector. It's like, one of the best projectors you can get in a like a £4,000 budget, right? It doesn't do 3D.
No.
So before we go off topic, though,
yes,
I want to show you what I've done with my Apple Vision Pro.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is something that might.
Boy,
hey.
We're going everywhere.
We're having a whole tour of the room.
We are. Let's try and focus.
Welcome to DocKit.
There we go. So yeah, this is the first time I'm using DocKit, so I might have done something for it to go find me. Well, that was
some
fun.
sort of gesture that it's misinterpreted and gone. Let's send it balloons.
So, the one thing that I think people were struggling with.
Yep.
The one thing I think people were struggling with was the light seal. And I picked up something from Infinity One. I think they're a Spanish company.
Okay.
And it basically does away with the light seal to have this little thing that rests on your forehead. And then you have you're closer to the lenses. I've got prescription lenses inside.
Yeah.
Let's see if, and so it increases your field of view, but also it means you can kind of see out the corner of your eye and still interact with people. And I think from the reactions that I've had whilst having that rather than the light seal, people find you more approachable as well.
Okay.
And I thought maybe it would have like a detrimental effect to watching films and TV shows, which is, of course, my main use case being that I'm an Apple TV nerd and a big film fan. But it doesn't. If anything, I think it just gives me a little bit more freedom. It feels more freeing. I don't have that pressure on my face. So I feel like I can wear it longer. My forehead doesn't like leave a mark. It's a really, really well thought out piece of modification that if you were looking to get an Apple Vision Pro, I would imagine Apple Vision Pro's going to launch here before WWDC.
Yeah.
If you are, I would highly recommend grabbing one of these.
I don't think my budget will stretch to it right now, but
sure.
Maybe.
But this modification is like £30, I think it was.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be much use without the Vision Pro, though.
Sure. Okay. No, but I'm not necessarily just talking to you, but
no, of course,
to anyone listening, right? I think it's the product Apple should have shipped.
If you've got a link to it, we'll pop it into the show notes as well for afterwards.
Sure. Absolutely.
That'd be really, really good. For some reason, Photoshop has just started verifying itself for me. Don't really know why. Not quite sure what's going on there. But, and I think it's busy, which is why my computer has decided to slow down just a smidge. But let's just stop that from happening. Hopefully that's fixed it. Sorry for any interruption.
It's all right. There were some cool little faces you were pulling there.
Good.
A little bit there.
Good. But
honestly, I think it's fantastic. I know it's expensive, and there's got to be future iterations of this.
Yeah, of course.
I hope there will be, because I do think it's a compelling experience, and I think it might be one of those things that the majority of people will go to the store at least once to try out and really be marveled by. Because I think the demo experience in store is really, really well done.
You did that right, because you picture us up in Cupertino and you did the full intro fitting, even though you knew what you were having. It's nice over there. Oh, it is back.
There we go.
We're good.
Honestly, my camera problems during these podcasts.
It's excitable, you know. It wants to have a little look round. It's wondering if the guys from Humane are back, and it's nodding.
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah, you look seriously at it. That'll tell it.
I think that hand gesture keeps it there, but I can't remember. So. But yeah, I genuinely think people could be marveled by Apple Vision Pro once it becomes available to more people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really interested to see what they do with 2.0 because I didn't expect spatial personas to come before 2.0.
No, that definitely feels like big enough to be a wow moment at Dub.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, all of these things just kind of adds to the... It feels like that must be what they wanted to do in the first place. And they were like, we can't quite get that right. Let's put them in little windows like a FaceTime. Because everyone had been saying, yeah, we're going to have these kind of almost indistinguishable from photo realistic. You know, we knew that they weren't going to go with Mimojis, which is a good thing. But yeah, it's definitely feels like what they wanted to do in the first place, and they just weren't quite there in time. But yeah, let's have a quick look at the chat and see what we've got down here. So Michael Pepper has been very involved with our chat there about Vision Pro. So wonder if we'll ever get Voice ID combined with Touch ID on the Mac and Face ID on iPhone and iPad for authentication. Yeah, this is actually something that came to mind for me. Not the Voice ID stuff, but I wonder if the iPad Airs are going to get Face ID. There's been no mention of it, but it would make sense, especially if they're going up to the sizes that the iPad Pros had and things like that. Potentially, it doesn't seem now that they're going to be reusing actually the displays, i.e. the mini LED ones, which we'd heard rumours that they might and then stopped again. But apparently there is another iPad-like device coming in the fourth quarter that's going to have the mini LED 12.9-inch display. What might that be?
Bigger iPad.
A bigger base iPad?
No. Sure. A bigger iPad. Like a bigger iPad Pro. Maybe something that's more art-specific.
Oh, well, I mean, that would be great, but this
like
is...
a Pro.
Yeah, this is like the same panel that we had in the old iPad Pros that apparently is going to be coming in a new device in the fourth quarter. This is according to Ross Young.
Okay.
My thought, and I think this might have come from the 9to5 Mac podcast, is that HomePod with a display on it. Maybe they're going to reuse that display, a 12.9-inch mini LED, which suggests it would be expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think they can come up with good reasons for that to happen. I think I mentioned it on the first podcast that we did together, where I said that the one thing that has been patented forever, but I wish would come to HomePod and would be like a world first, really, when it comes to any of the assistants, virtual assistants, is a way of being able to sign.
Yeah.
Right. So sign language communication via a HomePod, first ever. You do that by having a HomePod with a screen that follows you around, a little bit like this, and that's initially what I thought when Dock Kit was announced at Dub last year. So yeah, I hope that's what we see, because as I've mentioned earlier on in this episode, HomePod Mini's kind of long in the tooth.
Who knows? Maybe we will get another colour.
And I'd be interested to know. I don't know how you deal with it, but my HomePods really only get used for timers these days, in the kitchen, or for alarms or doorbells for the HomeKit doorbell.
If I'm watching the iPad in the kitchen, I'll normally AirPlay to the HomePod Mini.
Okay.
With the audio, so I'll have a YouTube video going, AirPlay the audio. That we do quite a bit, but the HomePod itself is like up in the top of the cabinets in the kitchen.
Sure,
so
but like asking for things, that kind of thing.
No. And we've only got the one, so we can't use intercom and things like that, which I think might be interesting with kids in the house. Like, come on down, it's dinner time, all that sort of stuff. Just noticed in the chat, Michael Pepper has said iPad Studio. Obviously, when we were talking about those larger ones, Microsoft's Surface Studio that they did, that was kind of iMac, but then folded down into like a drawing board kind of thing, and had a pencil with it, and all of the extra stuff. I thought that was a great concept, which I would love, like an iMac that was Apple Pencil compatible as opposed to touchscreen. That would be great. But
yeah,
is it ever going to happen? I don't really know.
I think it could, but I worry that it would be very, very niche, right? And there are already companies that do that very well.
Yeah.
And I think some of the newer versions of that now work with Mac. And so, yeah, it feels quite limited in terms of the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be able to do the stuff that you can do on Final Cut for iPad, where you can write onto the video and things with the pencil. That'd be grand. You could do that in your iMac all of a sudden. But yeah, it's a very small market. But then they still sell a Mac Pro, so they apparently don't mind selling 4 of a thing.
Going back to iPads a second, right? And iPad OS. The thing I want to be able to have that Vision OS experience, but in the real world with real hardware. I want to have multiple iPads in a setup, and they will talk to one another and they can interact. So maybe I've got one iPad Pro that I'm using as my viewfinder in Final Cut or DaVinci. I've got another one that I'm using as my video grade. I want those experiences. Basically, what is it? It's not continuity. It's universal control. But I want that for iPads desperately.
Yeah, like between
without needing to have a Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you've mentioned something along those lines before. I think that makes it a bit clearer what you were looking for with it. But yeah, it's just you could definitely do it from the trackpad and keyboard, but how you actually physically swipe a thing from one iPad to another, you could sort of throw it, I guess, which would be interesting. Yeah. Right, I think we're going to wrap this one up, because this is actually, it's been a decent length, hour and 20 minutes. Not too bad.
Not too bad at all.
Have we got any questions from the chat before we go? Let's just double check. Yeah, we've got nothing crazy in there. But while they put any questions they have got in there, let's do your where can people find you on the internet bit.
Absolutely. You can find my writing occasionally, some stories coming up, and of course over WWDC at MacStories.net, who celebrated 15 years this week. So
good going.
Yeah. Federico doing a fantastic job there alongside John Voorhees. And then, of course, you can find my podcast, which is an Apple TV podcast. We talk about everything from the highlight of the week to what's on Apple TV to display technology this week, and so much more. Also, kind of where the Apple TV stands we are Apple TV stans.
Yes.
But we're definitely critical as well, I think. And we always want to see the hardware and the software push forward. So you can check out our podcast, Magic Rays of Light, hosted between myself and my co-host, Devon Dundee, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Fabulous. And we have got a couple of comments down here that we're going to address. So first one from Michael Pepper Tech saying, put a camera on the back of the studio display or iMac, so if someone walks up to you, you can see the real world around you. So basically like Apple Vision Pro transparency as a wallpaper. I kind of like that.
I love it.
That's really cool because so many people use iMacs and stuff for like reception desks and that sort of thing. Like just having people appear in your display could be quite, worrying, but also...
you know what? Put that on the iPhone.
Yeah.
You know how many people I bump into that are looking at their phone and not looking up? It's one of my pet peeves, but we don't have time for that soapbox.
That's basically the clear iPhone that we've always wanted from those concept drawings that was never going to work because weirdly we haven't done clear chips, clear batteries, clear anything else. So
this is why we need to get rid of the phone.
Yeah, and even
Right.
Dockit agrees. It's nodding.
Yeah.
And then, do you think Stage Manager will ever come to the iPhone? I think there's a decent chance of that
what
because
on earth is it doing?
it's very excitable, isn't it?
Yeah, Belkin, honestly, help me.
I think it's because we asked in the last podcast if they'd send us some, and they didn't. They've just sabotaged yours. Yeah, do we think Stage Manager will come to the iPhone? I think that'd be great. Like being able to just pop your iPhone down and wander around the room and be able to... It's not quite there at the moment, is it? There is like an ultra wider version that it can go to. It kind of crops in slightly normally on the selfie camera, but does have a wider angle that it can go over to. So yeah, I'd like that. Like I think my iPad was the last one that didn't get it, because I got the 2020 iPad Air, and then the cheaper iPads came out, and they'd all got it. Like, even the 9th gen got it. I was like, it's not fair. So, sad times. Cool. I think we are done then. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Sigmund, for being here. That's been an absolute delight. This is actually going out as the podcast, so good times. Mark Sequence, you arrived just too late for anything to actually be happening. You'll have to watch this again later. Thank you ever so much, guys, and we will see you in the next one.
A complete revolution. We figured out a way. We machined all of the surfaces to create something that's genuinely new. You have to start again. Unapologetically plastic. Aluminium.